Well, if you watched my video doing the preview for the by-elections that happened on Thursday, the 21st of November, you'll know that I am cooked. And we'll get onto that in a bit. It was a very good night for the Conservatives, which I didn't see coming. It was a very bad night for the Liberal Democrats, which I also didn't see coming. And it was a mixed bag for the Labour Party. Um, Gained one seat, but we'll go through through Labour's case. And the big question out of our preview was, will Reform be able to capitalise on their good polling in certain parts of the country and turn those into genuine political gains? So thank you for being with us again. Please do like and subscribe and leave your comments with your thoughts as we go through the video. Thank you for being here. So we'll start off with a very good night for the Conservatives. So this was the first result that came in actually. Gosport down in the south coast, right next to Portsmouth, and the Conservatives managed to flip this away from Labour. So a good result for the Conservatives. However, this is not a Labour area of the country. The parliamentary seat is Conservative. There's only two Labour councillors. Well, there was three. Now there's two Labour councillors on the council. So a good result for the Conservatives. One that they would need to make in general if they're going to have this political comeback that they obviously want to have. And look, their votes are up by 10%, Labour down by 12%. Reform stood, only got about 10%, so I'm not sure it really impacted the result all that much, given the margin of victory. So a good start for the Conservatives, a good result for them. Labour obviously off to a bad start, but I don't think they'll be too upset about this. Like I say, it's not a part of the country where they're particularly popular. And with the way the narrative's going around the government at the moment, perhaps this was a likely result in this part of the country. Very good night for the Conservatives, very bad night for the Liberal Democrats. In my preview video, I glossed over about 4 or 5 of the Lib Dem defending seats and said, the Lib Dems will hold those easily, of which both the Somerset seats were parts. So I got this completely wrong. Look, it's an incredible turnaround by the Tories. They've got almost 60% of the vote here. The Liberal Democrats have cratered by a fifth. This was the seat, or the council seat, that was occupied by a lady who is now the MP for one of the local Somerset constituencies. I don't know where the popularity for the Lib Dems has gone. I don't know if this is. I assume it is local council related dissatisfaction from voters in Somerset. Somerset is a Liberal Democrat controlled council. They hold the majority on it, so I assume voters are fairly cheesed off with the way things are being run. And that's the reason why the Lib Dems vote share has collapsed like it has here. But yeah, very good night for the Conservatives, up a strong amount, almost as not quite as much as the Lib Dems are down, but a very good turnaround for the Conservatives there. Dacorum. Now, in my preview video, I was pronouncing this decorum, and when I was listening to it back, I was like, that doesn't sound right. It sounds wrong. So I'm calling it Dacorum this time, and hopefully one of those is right. So I'm hedging my bets. This was the council where the Liberal Democrats are kind of mired in scandal. They've had 8 of their female councillors resign the Lib Dem whip. So they had a majority in the council. They now no longer have a majority, and there's like 10 or 11 independents sat on the council. And I said I would assume that's going to hurt the Lib Dems in this one, and it appears like it has. They've lost a quarter of the votes, cratered, and again the Conservatives up a very impressive 17%. Reform stood in this one, but didn't really affect the outcome at all. So again, a very strong Conservative gain in the vote. And again, of course, like this one, we can understand it is probably to do with the scandal on the council involving the Liberal Democrats. But just across all of these Conservative good news stories, is just very strong increases in the Conservative vote. Horsham was another one where I said, oh, yeah, the Lib Dems will hold this easily. No contest whatsoever. Look, again, I don't know if this is dissatisfaction at how the council's run. Lib Dems do control Horsham. I can't remember if it's a majority or if it's a minority, largest party, but it is Lib Dem controlled. Um, and the Conservatives again up 10%. Lib Dems down 13. It's a very bad night for the Conservative for the Liberal Democrats. A very good night for the Conservatives. Close this one, very close. But again, this is the area. I mean, look, Horsham in terms of parliamentary constituencies, Conservative for over 100 years until July, when the Liberal Democrats won it off them, and it's the MPs. This is the MP's former council seat that was up for election here. So of course these are the inroads the Conservatives, same as Gosport, the inroads the Conservatives have to start making if they're going to have a comeback or starting with the local elections in May really, and building towards winning in 2029. This is what they have to do. So good night for them there. Last one then on the bad news, good news story for Lib Dems and Conservatives respectively was Rutland. Yet another one where I said they'll win it easily. They won this very comfortably a couple of years ago. Lib Dem councillor sadly died, which is why this is up for by-election. And I said, oh, the Lib Dems will defend this easily. Well, look, less than half, about 0.5%. About 1% in it on this one. Very close, run very close by the Conservatives. Again, Lib Dems down 30%. Again, I have to assume this is local council dissatisfaction. Rutland again is not Lib Dem majority, but it is Lib Dem control, Lib Dem largest party. It has to be dissatisfaction, I think. The reason I'm saying this for it has to be local dissatisfaction with the council is I can't think of a reason nationally why the Lib Dems vote share would be collapsing like this. They haven't really done anything. Perhaps that is the reason, I don't know. But I mean, I don't see any reason why Liberal Democrat voters would like them anymore since July or dislike them anymore since July. So I just feel like it has to be local council factors. Lib Dems not running councils very well, voters being a bit cheesed off. That would have to be my assumption. But that's the story from this this round of by-elections. Conservatives have done very well, increased their vote share by a very healthy amount across these seats, won a couple of them. And the Lib Dems just the opposite. Vote shares collapsed, and bad night for them. As for Labour, it's a mixed bag. So we started with Gosport where they lost. Of course, not ideal for them to lose, but as we've already said, it's not a Labour area. Only two Labour Labour councillors on the council. It's not an area they might expect to do well. Where is an area they'd expect to do well is Sefton. Now, Sefton is right up in the northwest of England. It's essentially Liverpool. This is as pretty much as safe Labour as you can get. You don't even have to look at the results for these places. They're just going to vote Labour. They're going to win way over half the vote, into the 60s, 70s%. It's just Labour through and through. But here in Sefton Council, 30% down Labour's vote. Now look, it goes to show how safe Labour it is. Down 30%, they still won by almost 10%. So look, still comfortably ahead. But in an area like this, 10%, less than 10%, that's kind of close. Now the Greens obviously have taken the lion's share of that vote from Labour, so it's clearly not a shift in the electorate from left to right. They're still very much left. So Labour under attack here from the left wing. Reform coming in as a new candidate, not stood here before, up to 12%. Look, miles behind, of course, like way behind both second and first. But interesting to see them leapfrog the Conservatives in an area where the Conservatives have never and never will be popular. And also jumping ahead of two very left-wing parties there as well, Workers' Party Britain and the trade unions. So, interesting to see Reform jumping into third. But alarm bells for Labour with their vote share sliding like that in an area of the country where, that's supposed to be there. Don't even have to check the result. Moving into Glasgow, similar, like Labour win, but it's very close and their vote share's down 10%. And actually, if we look, they've only really won it by virtue of the fact that the SNP are more unpopular than they are. Look, the SNP are very unpopular. They got hammered in July at the general election. They're on course to get hammered in the Holyrood election. I think Scotland's kind of fed up with the SNP at this point. They've had enough. They're cheesed off. So they're down by 10%, a little bit more than Labour. And Labour have managed to hang on to this one by about 2%. So look, not necessarily a bad news story for Labour. It's obviously not as dramatic a share in their vote drop as it was in Sefton, but still 10% down. And again, Reform jumping straight up into third place, um, immediately jumping ahead of the Conservatives. So this is the second week running we've seen Reform take third place in Scottish by-elections. So and again, look, they're miles behind. I don't think they're in any danger of gazumping Labour anytime soon in this part of the world, but it's just interesting to see them come straight in with a fairly healthy share of the vote. The second of the Glasgow by-elections, Labour won this one more comfortably. Vote share down less. SNP very unpopular, down by over 10% again. Reform again into third place. Not as strong, not as much of the vote this time, but still straight into third. And the last one, actually Labour managed to increase their vote here. And again, SNP down by loads. So look, that's what I mean. It's a mixed bag for Labour. And these three Glasgow by-elections kind of summarise that, really. Down by 10% in one, down by a bit less in another, up by 2% in the last one. So, and they held all three in the end of the day. So they've held all three council seats. I think they'll be happy enough with that. SNP, very unpopular, although still comfortably second, but, on a downward trajectory. Reform, third in all three in Glasgow, which may surprise some. The other ward up for election in Dagenham was Bennett's End. If you remember from the preview video, independent candidate sadly passed away when this ward was up for election, just as part of the normal cycle. I think it was 2 years ago. It's a two councillor ward. The independent one, and the other winner was a Labour councillor. So we did say in the preview video Labour might have a good chance of winning this one. Excuse me, which they have, but it's close. And we also said it'll be interesting to see, with the Reform candidate standing in both of these Dagenham by-elections, it'll be interesting to see if Reform impacts the outcome of the vote. And it's quite possible that they have. They've jumped in with 10.7%, and with the Tories losing by less than 1%, have quite possibly cost them a win in this ward. So, interesting to see. And again, the Conservatives, Labour have won, of course, but Conservatives up by almost 15%. So they've had a very good night again here, even though they didn't quite manage to win. Mixed bag for Labour. I think the Sefton result is kind of alarm bells. I don't know if that's specific to that ward in Sefton, if it's specific to Sefton itself, or if there's dissatisfaction across that region with Labour. That many people are going to not vote. But similarly, vote share up a little bit in this one, won this seat, held all three in Glasgow. So a mixed bag for Labour. By no means was it a bad night for them. Which brings us on to the last part of the video, and the question of, can Reform capitalise on good polling in parts of the country and convert that into real political gains? And we said Swale Council, or Merston Ward in Swale Council, that sits inside Sittingbourne constituency, parliamentary constituency, which is, on current polling, projected to flip from Labour to Reform. So could they win that one? And then the two in Kent, one on Kent County Council, one on Dartford Borough Council, polling quite well in Kent in general. Could they capitalise on that and convert that into gains? Well, in Swale they couldn't. It was up for by-election because the Swale Independence Alliance councillor is in a scandal. He hadn't been to a council meeting for 6 months, and therefore his seat was up for by-election. It was forfeit, hence the by-election. Now the Swale Independents have held on to this with a reduced vote share, but still actually very comfortable margin of victory, really, about 5%. Labour increasing their vote share here a little bit. Reform jumped in third place ahead of the Tories. So, look, I said I don't know the area. I don't know how popular the Swale Independence Alliance are. Clearly, they are quite popular. I didn't know if it was the guy who's resigning or had to resign, if he had a personal vote, carried a personal vote. But it seems that no, the Swale Independence Alliance are quite popular, and it does seem that this is a more left-wing leaning area of the county, area of the constituency even. So if Reform, do this and in the other two Kent by-elections, then they might be concerned because they've got to capitalise on their polling. So were they able to do that? Well, they were. In Kent County Council, they've gone from last place to first. And I did say in the preview video, I showed you the results from Kent County Council election in 2021 when Reform did stand a candidate. They got about 2% of the vote, as you can see from the vote share gain. And I did say at the time, I said in that video, I said, look, don't remember in 2021, Reform Party was not led by Nigel Farage. In 2021, people still generally had faith in the Conservatives' ability to deliver Brexit and control immigration. Since then, obviously, a lot's changed. A lot of people who vote Reform feel the Conservatives haven't managed Brexit. They feel the Conservatives haven't managed migration well enough. So I did say don't let Reform finishing in last place in 2021 with only 2% of the vote colour your thinking about how this one might go, because I think it's a different kettle of fish with Nigel Farage back in the picture. Reform have got MPs now, and they're generally in the ascendancy in terms of sort of polling nationally. They seem to be the party with a lot of momentum at the moment, and that's how it's turned out. They've raced up into first place. They've beaten Labour by about 5%. And look, the Greens have come in as new candidates with 12% of the vote. Did they cost Labour? Potentially. Quite potentially. I mean, it looks like the Reform Party have taken most of the vote off of the Residents' Alliance. Again, a chap who unfortunately passed away. He held the Dartford Borough Council seat as well. So that vote seems to have gone to Reform. Maybe some of the Conservative vote gone to Reform as well. They're down 10%. Did the Greens cost Labour here? Well, potentially, but the Reform Party won't care about that. They've got a county councillor. Might well be Reform's first county councillor, by the way. If you know if it is or not, let me know in the comments. I know they've won councillors in by-elections since July, but I don't know if any have been county councillors or if they were just borough and district councillors. So if you know that, let me know in the comments. Which brings us on to Dartford Borough Council, and Reform have won this one too. So look, I think a good night for Reform. We said in the preview video they've got to capitalise on the areas where they're polling quite well. They've got to convert that into real political gains in terms of councillors and council seats, and they managed to do that in Kent. Now, of course, typically I said Swale was going to be their best shot at doing so. They've not taken that one, and they've taken the other two, so that's just about how well my predictions went for tonight. And I tried to not even give predictions for this as well, and I've still managed to completely bottle it. So yeah, I'm absolutely cooked. I appreciate that. But this is what the Reform need to do, and this is what they'll be hoping to build on as we go through. And there's more by-elections, but of course, with May 2025 being a big round of local elections with 2,000 councillors coming up for election and county councils in England. So I think they'll be happy with their night's work here. They've won these two in Kent. They've jumped into third place in Scotland, which is nothing to write home about, but it's just interesting to see them have that much support in Scotland, where I don't think anybody really expected them to be popular at all in Scotland. So yeah, it's a good night for Reform in the end as well. Also with this one, before we move on to the conclusions, look at Labour and Conservative, relegated to 4th and 5th out of 5. The Conservatives here, their vote shares cratered by almost a quarter. So it seems that voters in this part of Kent, at least, are pretty cheesed off with the mainstream parties. Now, Labour did come second in the county council election, that's true. But this result, taken in isolation, it seems that, the people of Kent are pretty cheesed off with the Conservatives, and they're pretty cheesed off with Labour. And that is the voter base that Reform needs to motivate. That is essentially the Boris Johnson coalition from 2019, really. Those are the people that Reform need to motivate. So that was the by-elections from the 21st of November 2024. And yeah, so good night for the Conservatives. They managed to gain 4 seats, taking a couple off the Lib Dems, one off the Labour Party, Um, is this just a Badenoch bounce? Kemi Badenoch, the new leader, is it just a bounce in their poll ratings because they've got a new leader, or is there something more substantial, more um, sort of, is there more body behind it? Is there more weight behind this move in the Conservative vote share increasing like we've seen? Can they maintain it, or is it going to fall away? Be interesting to see. Will Reform bounce now that they have managed to make those tangible political gains, two in one night? You know, that's good PR for them. I'm sure they'll push it hard on their social media. And I think, you know, we said about them motivating this voter who is cheesed off with Labour and the Tories. They're also, I think, the voters who in July stayed at home. You know, if we look at the general election result, yes, the Conservatives got absolutely wasted and their vote share collapsed. But Labour's vote share didn't increase commensurately with that. In fact, Labour's vote share, I think, was essentially flat, if not even slightly lower than 2019. So, I'm sorry if you're a Labour voter, you won't like hearing it, but the fact is Labour won their majority because the Tories were very unpopular and Reform deprived them of some marginal seats. If Reform want to become a serious political force, they need to motivate that person who sat at home in July thinking, well, I don't like Labour, I don't like the Tories, Reform aren't going to win, I'm not going to bother voting. If they can have results like this and they can make them somewhat frequent where they win seats on councils, people will start to say, oh, actually Reform can win. So instead of sitting at home, they'll go, well, actually, I'll go and vote then. People need to feel, for Reform to be able to make any impact, people have to feel like their vote will count and that it's not a wasted vote. And if they can have results like they had tonight, then I think they'll be able to motivate people to go out and vote for them. And lastly, what position are Labour in? Look, we said it is a mixed bag for them tonight. They, you know, gained the seat in Bennett's End, but they had a pretty bad result in Sefton, even though they won, down 10% at one of the wards in Glasgow, but also increased their vote share in some other seats. And in the end of the day, they did defend most of their seats, bar one. So, you know, what do you think? What's it looking like for Labour? What sort of trajectory are they on? I think they're in a bit of a perilous position at the moment. I don't think the government is particularly popular as it stands. I think they spent a lot of political capital at national level. I think they spent a lot of political capital on silly issues, like taking the winter fuel payment away for £1.5 billion, taking away inheritance tax relief on farms to a certain level, raises £600 million. It just seems like, for the amount of money they've saved on these policies, not worth the loss in political capital and popularity. So I think they need a narrative change. I do think that it seems like the trajectory of their vote share, particularly in England, is downward in most places on average. So where do you think Labour are? Let me know in the comments what you think, and let me know what you think about everything else we've spoken about in this video. Thank you for joining us. We'll be doing another video probably early next week or middle of next week, because there will be more by-elections on Thursday next week as well. So we'll have a look at those and what we can expect, and you can tune in to see how I get all of those wrong as well, like I did last week with these ones. So thank you very much for watching. Please do leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel for more, and I will see you on the next one.